probably prepubescent. Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce. I just spent an hour and a half with the coziest Carey Callahan on record thus far. While Carey Callahan has a personality, she's still deciding on whether or not to be a personality, just as I am a personality, and you too could be a personality if you went out of your way to actually select a profile picture for your avatar. But anyhow, Carey Callahan is known somewhat for being a detransitioner. While she doesn't want to pin her personality and her identity on the status of being trans or detrans, we do talk about her dysphoria, her body dysphoria, and her gender dysphoria, actually quite in some detail. And we get beyond that. We get into different ways that the conversation is forming and being deformed within the realm of what is gender, what is sexuality, what is politics, and so on and so forth. This is a wide-ranging conversation. I suggest that you make a cup of tea or get yourself a root beer or something that I drink, such as a, let's say, Badhits Zafha, India Pale Ale, which is what I was drinking tonight. But however you need to stay hydrated, stay hydrated. That's what my doctor told me. And strap on in for another wonderful time with Benjamin Boyce and his guest. This time being Carey Callahan. Ba-ba-da.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm on my couch with my dog.
Oh, yeah?
Got my mocktail going. Yeah. Do you want to see my dog?
Yeah, sure. I'm not afraid of
Okay.
dogs at a distance. Oh.
This is Paco. Yeah, I don't think he's super scary. Sometimes he acts scary, or like he tries to pretend like he identifies as scary, is what I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You look cozy.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm feeling cozy.
Oh, good.
I like my evenings to be very cozy.
Yeah, it helps with the day.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I also like just that age where I'm just like starting to die slowly, so I just want to be comfortable. You're getting evening Carey is what I'm telling you.
Right. You're preparing for the eternal rest by being presently restive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Good. I love the glasses too.
Hey, thanks. I think they make me look smarter.
Yeah, in a very brazen, smart kind of way.
Rad, cool. Brazen. That's a great. I love that. I want to be brazen.
It just came to me.
Yeah, oh, I want to be a snap.
Like the breakfast cereal?
Yeah, like snap. Yeah, snap, crackle, pop. Yeah, I just like that as a personality type, like a snapper.
Well, but not like the social justice kind of
I cannot
snap
deal
chorus.
when people do that instead of clapping. I cannot deal. Why do people do that?
Originally, I think it was because it's triggering to people with who've experienced being slapped as a child, or
No,
I don't know, but
really,
I don't know. But it was supposed to be like a softer, kinder, gentler form of appreciation, but then it just became code for being cool. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's when I want to be appreciated by clapping, lots of clapping and yelling.
Like
Yeah,
the
put it
Orson Welles
together.
kind of thing. And yelling?
Yeah, definitely. When I want my appreciation loud and I
Yeah.
want it to be a big deal.
Yeah. More of a white
I don't want
snake than a
gentle.
beat poet kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I get you.
Definitely.
How's your practice going?
Oh, it's good. Yeah, all my kiddos are good. Yeah, it's fun. I'm really like when I graduated school, I was a little bit bummed out that like I wasn't like with how the atmosphere of stuff is right now. It wouldn't make any sense, and it's kind of impossible for me to just like work with clients who experience gender dysphoria. And when I graduated school, I was like sort of bummed out by the reality of that. Like, oh shoot, like, here's this thing I really care about, but I actually have this really challenging full-time job. Like, working with people with other stuff going on. But now I actually am kind of grateful that that's how things are. Cause like long term, like 10 years out, I definitely see myself working with detransitioners, and I work with like mostly Medicaid clients right now, and I feel like what I think is going to happen long term is that like there's going to be a lot more detransitioners, and they're going to have actually like a lot of the same challenges that my Medicaid clients have. Does that make sense? Like,
in what way? Oh, like insurance wise, or you're
like,
talking about mentally?
Like financial stress and like how to get like services and housing and stuff like that. So, so my practice is going well. I'm definitely learning, but I like it.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, though, because there's a lot of. I was speaking with Claire Graham today, who is a person with an intersex condition, and she's been speaking out against how the trans activists are using intersex people to advance their weird ideological positions, and then end up getting a lot of funding, at least in the UK. The trans activists, or the groups that are run, I guess, now by people who ascribe wholeheartedly to that form of trans activism, are getting money from the government specifically for intersex people, and then actually doing a lot of harm to the intersex clients by, or that group, by putting all this gender theory stuff on a medical condition, and and then making it even more difficult for them to get access to their medical care because of all this weird pronoun and the swapping of gender and sex. So that's a long preamble to say that there's a lot of resources, and there will be more for trans specific people, and the houses and the the groups that are there to provide services for trans people probably won't end up supporting detrans people. And even maybe even like what we kind of see now is even shunning them. So these people are going to be doubly impacted because they're going to have a lot of conditions that they need to work through. And like you said, financial stress. And so there might be a big need for that. Especially if these groups that are running these organizations that are running this aid don't really want to deal with that for ideological reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know a fair amount of detransitioned people who still have to go to trans healthcare centers because that's where the knowledgeable endocrinologists are. So, I mean, like if you've already had something like a orchiectomy or a hysterectomy or something, like you got to go to an endo that knows what they're doing. And so that usually is in a trans specific context. And then, frankly, like I've also just known a lot of detransitioners who like their housing was still kind of within a trans context, like they were still living with all trans people and stuff like that. So yeah, the ideological thing makes it rough. I think people right now still are at a point where they just kind of like aren't fully out as detrans, you know?
I mean, it seems like it's all in because of the state of discourse around this. It's that you're either all in or you're all out.
Yeah, you're all in, you're all out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we talked in the last maybe video about how like to be kind of like taken seriously in trans healthcare, you really need to be like on board with pediatric transition. Like it's kind of like an all in or all out thing with that too. There's no room for like, okay, I work with this kind of trans population, but I don't feel great about this pediatric transition stuff. You can't do like an 80-20 on the platform. You got to be all in or all out on the platform, which is crazy for medical care.
Yeah, that sounds pretty scandalous, if not malpractice worthy. But
yeah,
maybe there's a better way of framing that. But
yeah, it's definitely notable. It's like for instance, I don't know so USPath is like the United States Professional Association for Transgender Health, And at least at their first conference, which was like 2017, like no reporters were, oh, there was no such thing as like a press pass or anything like that. So there were no reporters there. And definitely like how these doctors and therapists like talk about things when it's just like them in a room is very different from what gets presented to the public. And and that's so strange. That's so strange for healthcare.
You were there for that in the 2017? Yeah. You said US Path, but I've heard of W Path. Is that the same thing?
W Path is the world professional.
Okay.
And then they made a separate US Path one, and I believe there's a European branch also. So the US, I think they are separate organizations now. I'm not sure that. I think you join and pay dues to US Path separately from W Path.
So you're saying that they speak differently when they're amongst themselves as opposed to the public, and you're not talking about them using more specific jargon like in a medical term and being too technical, but you're saying the way that they think about things is presented differently to the world than it is amongst themselves.
Yeah, I think that they just like say kind of crazier shit like when they're in a room by themselves together. I remember seeing a presentation about like it was like transitioning like non-binary youth, and this endocrinologist said that she expected that in the future there would be like a non-binary sex hormone to be able to give kids. And like that doesn't make any damn sense. Like I remember her saying that, and no one in the room laughed. Everyone in the room took it seriously. This is like a room with like 100 people, and it's like, wait, what the hell are you talking about? Like the human body runs on like testosterone or estrogen. Like talk a little more about how we would come up with a different sex hormone. It doesn't. Well, anyway,
are they imagining like some perfectly pure androgynous entity that floats through the world without plugging into it?
Yeah, I think so. Like a hairless, like sex characteristic free human.
Right from the frame of a Marilyn Manson video, it sounds like.
Right. Which sounds to me like, okay, like that's kind of the fantasy of a person who is scared to interact with human sexuality, right? Like, okay. I don't know. Maybe that's harsh.
This might be a little too weird for you, and so we can just back away from this. But I knew this individual, this gay man, when I was 20, and this was when I was just out of like my little Christian bubble, and I was interacting with the world. I was in Chicago. I was working at a fancy place down in the Gold District, or the Third Coast, or the Gold Coast.
Where'd you work in Chicago?
It was a Starbucks like right on Oak and Rush. If you know that.
I used to live in Logan Square.
Okay, yeah, I briefly dated a redhead in Logan Square.
Oh, lucky you.
It was a disaster. Anyway, so I started interacting with people that were completely different, and like I started just interact with homosexual people for the first time, right? Gay men specifically. I'm like, oh, these are just people. And just like, oh, okay, like it's too much work to not love them, as who they are. But there's one person that really stood out to me, and they had a very particular aesthetic and a way of just like walking through the room that was very, very special in a way. And I had this dream about them. It was a very powerful dream where they just kind of walked into the room and they were just like shedding feathers everywhere. And I just understood this person as... I just understood this person as somebody who doesn't fit in the world in that sexual binary way. It was the closest to an androgynous individual that I had ever met up until then. There were still definitely a male version of this entity. But it was like like an angel. I don't know how to describe it. So I'm just trying to say that like there are certain people that I've interacted with that don't necessarily neatly fit into the male or the female standard binary, and they're special people, and they just have a different feeling. And by feeling, just the way that I gauge them is just different.
Oh, okay.
But
Like,
at
so
the
you're
same
sort
time,
of talking about like on a spiritual or energy level.
yeah, on an energetic level, I guess is probably
Yeah.
the most mundane way of saying it. And certain trans people that I know, especially the males, the trans women, I guess is the correct term. They just seem different to me, and they just feel more androgynous in the sense of like kind of pre-puberty. Like they maintain or sustain like a prepubescent kind of just vibe. I'm sorry, this is like way out of my wheelhouse.
Keep going. It's so weird. I love it. I love that it started with a dream about someone who made a like very big impression on you. I love that, actually.
It was just, yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, imagine like being that person and like making such an impact on people when you walk by them, right? Because like this person made a big impact on you, but like for sure you're not the only person who like was like, whoa, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, just imagine like trying to make sense of who you are in the world when like the response you get is like so big like that.
Yeah, that response kind of leads to a responsibility or like a hyper awareness of themselves.
Yeah.
You know? And so I do really deeply sympathize with a certain aspect of the transgender experience by just like being persistently aware that you don't fit into the expectations that society has upon you and that you even have upon yourself. And I feel like I kind of understand what gender dysphoria is a little bit in that way. Just on a sympathetic
hyper-awareness?
level. Yeah, like a hyper awareness or just well, okay. In my discussions, like I really appreciate Blanchard and his work, and he's an amazing individual and stuff. I still think that there's room for development on the autogynephile male, because it seems like there's certain males who are very attracted to themselves as women, but there's a certain contingent of males that are very unattracted to themselves or like interrupted in their life by being a man and like really loathing or having a very deep sense of disgust about their masculine characteristics. And I wonder if that's not a subset. And this is all just a way of asking you or wanting to ask you, like, when you talk about your gender dysphoria, like what are you talking about? Like, what is that to you?
Oh. Yeah. So mine is, I feel like over the past year, this has actually become clear to me. Mine is super, super body dysmorphic. So it's very much about my body, and it's very much about like shame and disgust for my body. And you know what actually finally clicked for me that it was body dysmorphic was that, you know, like it kind of like, since I got out of the trans community, I have like periods where my gender dysphoria will be like elevated, and then periods where it will really die down. When I was in the trans community, it was just like constantly elevated. But I noticed that when it would get elevated, it would be times when like I noticed that I would feel, it would be like times when I felt really powerless, and then times when I felt really humiliated. And it's funny that I've had this experience for so long, and I finally connected that last year. But so for me, like gender dysphoria means that like I look in the mirror and I want to like rip like my secondary sexual characteristics off. And
pardon me asking, do you want to be reduced into something that's sexless, or do you not want to have like that extra? Is it like something that's there that's extra that doesn't need to be there, or that the presence?
I mean,
I
I sort of think that the desire has actually like really changed over the years. When I was trans identified, I definitely had an image of myself as a guy that like I could kind of always envision every time I looked in the mirror. Like, so when I looked in the mirror back then, I could like almost kind of see like the guy that, you know, I kind of like thought I was. And then there would also be like all this other stuff, right? Like all this stuff I don't want. But now like it's not like that part is really gone these days when I have episodes of gender dysphoria. I don't, so that has really changed. Like I used to be like really, I thought I had this idea or this vision that I would like look like David Duchovny as a dude, which is like so
I have that
stupid.
every day.
Right. It's very upsetting not to look like David Duchovny, for sure. Young David Duchovny, not David Duchovny now, but like, you know, 90s X-Files.
Okay, yeah, X-Files, not Californication.
No, I never wanted to look like Californication, David Duchovny. But like, so honestly, like very clearly looking back now, I'm like, Carey, that's who you were like fixated on as a like pubertal girl.
Yeah.
Like that's not, but so that's not there anymore. So like pretty much, I think it's probably more accurate to describe what I experience these days as like body dysmorphic symptoms.
So body dysmorphic, so it's not seated specifically in the gender expression of your body, but it's just like being embodied itself is.
Yeah, these days it's just it.
Huh.
I mean, I think that what I had back then was also this like very persistent, obsessive fantasy, you know? But I don't have that anymore. Like, I know that if I were to transition, I would look nothing like David Duchovny. I'm not, and so I know that the reality of what I would look like has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
With that very obsessive fantasy I had. So luckily that fantasy's not there anymore.
Do you think that you constructed your David Duchovny-ness as a way to compensate or to cope with what you feel now? Like, was it like another layer that you've since gotten away? It's like, well, I don't want to be this, but if I imagine myself as this other thing, then I won't have to deal with that, with what I don't
think
like.
so.
Yeah.
You know, I had kind of a hard, like, early adulthood, and I think that I maybe wasn't taking seriously like situations where I felt powerless and overwhelmed, and like I truly didn't have the skill sets to navigate them. And so I think that obsessive fantasy of like what life would be like if I were a dude and the kind of dude that I would be kind of like kept me afloat, because it kept me from fully experiencing my life, and I couldn't handle my life. You know what I mean? Like, it was sort of a protective thing. Like, okay, like, this is shit, but I'm really supposed to be David Duchovny, right? And,
Yeah.
and I would be living the life I'm meant to live if I got to be the dude I'm supposed to be. So it was like a self-protective thing.
Were you overwhelmed because of what you can see now as like a hypersensitivity, or were you not, did you not have the stability to reach a certain level of competence when you were out of the home, let's say?
Those are great questions. Okay, so I think it's a mix. I actually think that there are social dynamics and kind of like emotional experiences that I am a little bit hypersensitive to. Specifically, I have always been hypersensitive about being objectified, and I have never, ever, ever been good with good at navigating like kind of like how do I want to say this? Like, you know, there are lots of workplaces and contexts where part of the context is like kind of like banter about sex, right? And banter about people's bodies and stuff like that. And like I'm just like, I'm hypersensitive about that stuff, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of fun in
Hmm.
that kind of way. I get real sensitive, I get real weird, I get real awkward, and I don't really like it. And so I think that that's partly about hypersensitivity, and I think that it's also partly about social skills. Um,
Hmm.
you know, like in a situation like that, I get anxious enough that I can't really navigate it and feel powerful at the same time.
Hmm.
Where, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. What do you mean by powerful? Like that you have a sense of agency, or that you can say no to this and yes to that thing, or like redirect the
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah, I lose my sense of agency.
Hmm.
Like I kind of like freeze up and like dissociate a little bit. And I forget, I get anxious enough that I forget all the different paths that I could take and choices I could make to,
Huh. Okay. Yeah.
and that has to do with anxiety. And it also has to do with like skills, I think.
Hmm.
And then, you know, sometimes there are just situations that are fucked up, and it's like you don't have a
Yes.
sense of agency because someone actually wanted to create the experience of you not having agency. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's you made me think that there's this thing called the hookup culture.
hmm
But in male spaces, there's this thing called the checkout culture, where you're checking out, this girl, that girl, or like what you're talking about. Like it seems that's kind of what you're talking about, like this kind of evaluative interaction with bodies
oh,
that
I'm awful with that.
that's
Yes, that is exactly,
pre-predatorial. That's kind of
yeah,
yeah.
right. I'm not good with it. I'm not good
Hmm.
at it. I like pre-predatorial. Wow, that's neat.
Well, I think yeah. I mean, I'm walking on eggshells here because I have I'm in a very particular situation with my audience where I have the attention of feminists and I have the attention of MRAs, and I have the attention of all these different groups, and I know the sensitivities of all these groups. And what I'm trying to do is just say, okay, there's a way of talking about these things that's not shameful, it's just honest, and we can talk about these things. But it's interesting because part of your biography is that you ended up in a very male space and a very judgmental male space with comedy, with stand up, and it's actually those are skills that you actually have to have, like to be very severe
Yes.
about people so you can gauge your audience, and because they're checking you out, so you have to be checking them out, and so
Yeah,
that can slide over into like kind of reducing people into their characteristics and stuff.
totally. And like one thing that pretty much every comedian has to do is that when you get up on stage, you got to do at least one joke right off the bat about how you look. And that's
Hmm.
not just women, that's literally everyone. Like start looking like that joke is coming in one of the first two jokes. And you
Huh.
have to do that because the audience is anxious about like, well, first of all, it's always like you don't. Anytime a stand-up comedian gets on stage, you're like, this could be awful. Person could be awful, and like comedians kind of have to right away offer up like, okay, whatever is funny about my physicality, like whether it's like my skin color or like my
Huh.
height or anything. And like I have a big ass, so like to be like to be a
I've
woman is
never
like
seen
a
it, but I'm so
uh,
glad that I have confirmation.
so like I would constantly be in these situations, um, like where I would get off stage and then the guy coming up like after
Oh.
me would make jokes about my body.
Hmm.
Um, but
Huh.
like not usually they weren't like hostile. He wasn't like making jokes like I was a freak, but he would be making jokes about like, you know, like me being thick or like
Hmm.
stuff like that. So like those guys in comedy, like to them, it's a very like working class male subculture. They do not consider calling you thick like offensive or, you know, it's like a friendly thing. They think they're being friendly, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for my hypersensitive ass, like it's
Weird.
very strange that I sought out that context and for so long.
Yeah. I kind of want to get inappropriately Freudian, but it seems like you were trying to put yourself in a position where you would challenge yourself with your sensitivity.
I
Uh,
totally, yeah. I do think, like, looking back, I very clearly was seeking out
hmm.
situations where there was some kind of, I was definitely trying to create the situation where what my body meant to other people was going to be discussed openly in front of me, right? Like,
Weird.
otherwise, why would you put your whole body in front of a comedy audience,
Huh.
right? So yeah, I think it's interesting when people do that, when people constantly create exactly the situation they're going to be uncomfortable in.
Yeah.
And I definitely did that for a really long time.
Hmm.
But then for me, it just like it just like built and built and built. Like I just kept doubling and doubling down again and again until I was trying to like resolve it through transition instead of just being like, maybe you don't want to be, maybe you don't like being objectified. Maybe just chill out. You don't have to be objectified if you don't want to.
Huh. How did the idea of transition enter your head?
Well, I was living in, let me think. So the first trans guy I met was at college at Ohio State. And I remember my very first thought was like, I am so jealous he gets to cut off his breasts. That was like exactly what I thought, which is an interesting thought because it's not like I thought like, oh, I'm like him. That's not the thought. It was like, shoot, if I was like him, I could cut off my breasts. And then like I got out of college, I started dating women. I moved to Chicago. Trans guys were like kind of all over the queer scene in Chicago. And they were usually like the most popular people in the scene.
Why?
And
what was the characteristics that made them so popular?
Okay, it's because women who date women love masculine female people. So like it was like the trans guys and it was the butch girls that were the most popular.
All the man, none the dick. Is that the
Shut
saying?
up.
Sorry, I'm really sorry. Like it came to me.
I mean, like trans guys are usually like baby faced and cute. So
yeah.
So anyway, so you know,
they were desirable. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and they were radical. Being radical in that scene was very important. And like being trans, you were just like, you know, you're just like automatically radical. So you didn't even have to do any like work on like prison abolition. You could just be radical. So and then, you know, my thought still at that point was like, shoot, like if I was like them, I could like get my breasts cut off. That was always like my one main thing that I always wanted. And then like as the years went on, kind of like the category of what trans was expanded, right? Like, so you didn't have to be a trans guy. You could be genderqueer, you could be non-binary. And most importantly to me, you could be genderqueer or non-binary, and that meant you could cut your breasts off. And and then I think that like, I mean, it's also important that I started dating someone who was like non-binary and had a mastectomy, right? And like, so, you know, you're kind of like, I think I was sort of looking for all the similarities. And like, there were tons of similarities. Like, you know, talking about our childhood, like, I don't know, the case in my head that I was always trans just like built up and built up and built up. But then like all these things from my childhood that are really just like tomboy stuff or like nerdy tomboy stuff, like loving the X-Files. Like obviously now I can be like, obviously that doesn't mean that you're any kind of trans person. But like when I was with like my non-binary person I was dating, like suddenly like me being a horse girl was like part, you know, was like anything that was even slightly gender nonconforming in my childhood got brought into this like case that I was always trans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a joke about informed consent and one of the check boxes being the X-Files, but
yes.
But I wanted to segue into those that Facebook group that Fourth Wave Now has been publishing on Twitter of
Oh
these
my gosh.
mothers who are obsessing about the gender of their child. And it
Yeah.
really reminded me of what you just said. It's like you're you're at a position in, I guess, your early 20s that you're talking about, and you're looking back at your childhood and you're interpreting the whole story of your childhood because now you have a narrative that can
Right.
resolve it or solve it in a way. And it's like now these mothers are kind of doing the same thing. They're looking for every instance of mitigation from an expectation of the ideal feminine, I guess, in there,
Hmm.
or the ideal male, I guess, or a manifestation of the feminine in their male child, or the masculine in their female child.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a desired narrative. And like frankly, memory and how we recall the past is always affected by what we want right now, you know? Like when we think about what our parents did in the past, it has to do with how we feel about our parents right now in this moment, right? So
Hmm.
if you have a really strong desired narrative, like you want to like like desperately hate some part of your body, you want to cut it off, you're gonna be able to build that narrative, right?
Yeah.
And if you are a parent whose sense of community and identity is based on having a trans kid, like you are going to get your you are going to make sure that your kid's a trans kid.
That is, I didn't think about that. Like, I was very deeply disturbed by reading those, that Facebook stuff, and I need to, when the dust settles, I'll try to put together an episode on that because they sent me all the files that I need to scrub of personal information. But that these mothers, mostly mothers, it seems, but I don't know, mostly mothers are using their child as a pass to gain, acceptance and community, and the child is the ticket into this community, and
Yeah.
and that's another danger of, I guess, ideology writ large, and it's a mutation of what the peak resilience girls kind of talk about when they talk about like getting into this culture and then building up their transness out of this culture, and then like when they go to detransition, like what's more difficult, to get off the hormones or to let go of all your friends and all your community, and the community has such a strong pull
Yeah.
to that, and so when that transfers into and I don't want to go down the road, but it seems like a female typical kind of desire to want to plug into a group on that level or in that way. Not that men don't, but there seems to be something that I'm seeing arise in females that are in their teen years, and then these mothers like also needing to, like, this ideology has been built around like these certain communal rituals, and so it's just so dangerous when now these adult women are projecting that onto their children, and then buying them like fake penises, or I guess maybe coaching them in binding, which will have spinal problems and chest problems and stuff like that.
Yeah, can we talk about like one specific screen grab that you probably saw?
Yeah.
Did you see the screen grab by I don't recall if it was a mom or a dad, talking about how they were having trouble like selling their trans daughter on keeping up estrogen injections or moving from puberty blockers to estrogen injections because their trans daughter had discovered masturbation. And masturbation is wonderful and a lot of fun. And why would you want to give it up? And their daughter didn't want to give it up. And it's like, well, that's a wonderful thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's actually what your trans daughter is supposed to be developmentally doing right now.
Yeah, the parent was upset. If I read that correctly, the parent was upset that their child wanted to get off hormones because the child couldn't orgasm while the hormones were in their body. And like the parent was having a problem not with the orgasm, but with the loss of the transness of their child, which is,
Right.
it goes back
Like
to that.
they were talking about it like it was their kid being short-sighted. Like it was how like it was so short-sighted of their kid to value orgasm over the aesthetic effects that the puberty was going to have. And it was like, wait 1 second, your
Hmm.
kid has found something better than exogenous hormones, and that's masturbation. So like just let your kid masturbate. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that your kid wants to touch themselves.
Huh.
Anyway, So crazy. Sorry. So crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, I want to get risky.
We've actually been like really crazy all this phone call. So
Okay.
I
I
bet it's
started
not
with
that risky.
my trans dream.
Right. Yeah. That was pretty wild. I loved it.
But what is the significance of the breast? Why is or was the breast itself a horrible thing or a horrific thing or inspiring such disgust in you? I mean, it doesn't seem like it was the fatty tissue or the way it bounced because you didn't have a sports bra. It seems like it had a psychological significance. And I ask not just to get into you, but I think that there's probably other females, young females, that like are interrupted by that protrusion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is true that it's legit that once you get breasts, your interactions in public change dramatically.
Okay.
So that's just the truth. Like, how you will get reacted to in public changes dramatically in often like weird and scary ways.
Okay.
And I think adult women resolve that by getting a new skill set. But there are years where you don't have that skill set yet, right? Like now, if a man yells something disgusting at me, I know exactly how to be incredibly scary. But like, at 14, I certainly didn't know that. But
so the landscape shifted, and it came down to like this very specific body part that you experienced the growth of, that kind of reshaped the world or reshaped the way that people saw you.
Yeah, that. And then I think also, I don't want to get too much into this because I think sometimes this theory is overblown. I do think porn has something to do with it. Like a lot of times when we think about like where people see images of breasts and the kinds of breasts that they see images of, you're either seeing breasts in like Victoria's Secret ads or you're seeing them in porn, right? And so that's a very specific kind of breast. It's usually like a surgically enhanced breast, right? And like a lot of women's natural breasts look very unlike surgically enhanced breasts, which I think can feel humiliating, like, just because of that. And then also like really like degrading and humiliating things happen to the people whose naked breasts you see.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I think, I think a lot of times having breasts feels like a humiliating experience to young women.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that we don't live in a society where it's compulsory for teenage boys to wear tights, like, because that would have really
should be. Let's
disrupted.
That. That's new. Let's make society better. No, that's awful of me. I'm sorry. I don't. Let's not punish teenage boys just because it's trying to be a girl.
The banana lobby would go way up. At least we know that. So somebody would benefit.
Shut up. Oh God. Yeah.
No, but I know, but I mean, I was trying to reference like the hyper awareness that I had about that body part, and like, okay, like this is something that's seen all the time now, and like I have like very easy ways of covering that up, and like it's usually below a desk, it's below a counter. I can't imagine like this one characteristic that has a very sexual value in our society, all of a sudden like it's just something that you have to like deal with all the time, and it's like right at eye level, and sometimes that's the eye level that people like see first, but it is interesting also that this isn't just about you, but like the attitude towards masturbation and porn, like the orgasm is good and healthy and beautiful and wonderful. The ways of achieving orgasm, though, have a number of different societal consequences, because insofar as you're depicting other people in order to achieve your orgasm, then there's a whole ethical value set that insofar as we don't talk about pornography to young people, we leave out these ethical questions, or just like not even just like a moralizing way of thinking about it, but just questions about like, who's that person in that image? Where did they come from? How are they enhanced? How are they made to look like what you want? versus
Yeah.
how have they, versus how the people that you interact with are either made or not made in ways that you do want.
Yeah. Porn is tricky. Porn is real tricky. Um, and how it impacts um,
Hmm.
how it impacts, like whatever porn you consume and how it impacts how you end up having sex is, I think, very interesting. And then the kind of sex that porn obviously can't actually portray because sex, there are I think there are lots of like sexual experiences where like it's a very embodied experience. You're not going to be able to capture it in a visual format, right? It would be like a cinematic,
Hmm.
like real achievement to be able to capture the feeling of like really being intimate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're 13, like, 13-year-olds don't know anything, and then like if they consume all this
Yeah.
like gonzo stuff, sometimes literally gonzo stuff, like,
Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, it's tricky though. I'm not trying to get into like a moralizing thing.
Yeah.
I do think it has a lot of impacts on like what we think about our bodies and how our bodies fit together and stuff.
How did you transition then into recognizing, how did the gender dysmorphia like turn into what you're calling body dysmorphia now? You said it's pretty recent, but like what are the attitudes or the ideas that kind of came to light that shifted it away from just the femaleness?
Yeah. Something that I'm really grateful for is that, one, I'm really grateful that I just kind of like circumstances were perfect for me to just like get out of the trans community. And I sort of like left in a very freaked out state, but I don't think that I would have I think that if I hadn't been so freaked out, I wouldn't have like gotten so far away, and I needed to get far away. Um, and then like I kind of got serious about tracking the symptoms. And I really, really, really think that people should track their symptoms. I think you should rate your symptoms. I think you should be like, scale from 1 to 10, how bad is gender dysphoria today?
Mm.
Because for me, at least, like the patterns are actually really, really clear. That, like, for instance, like there was a time in my life where I was smoking lots of weed. Like, weed is not in any way good for me and dissociating from my body. So like it's actually a pretty clear link. Like if I do that, I will probably not that day, but maybe like a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, like get that feeling of like wanting to tear my body off. Um so like for me at least, and by the way, I'm not saying that everyone's gender dysphoria is like this, okay? Like I think there's probably huge diversity in the experiences we call gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for me, like once I started tracking it, the experiences that were creating it became real clear.
It
So
seems like you
then,
kind of digested the information, like the one of the difficult things about being an embodied person isn't just having a body, but like persisting through time, and like you keep on having the same stimulus over and over and over again, and not a lot of people are taught the skills to actually just map out their experience and see how it's cause and effect, and what's really going on. So it seems like one step is
totally.
like you really digested being a historical biographical entity, like something happened here, this is what happened over here, and then again and again.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think maybe other people can do that a little more without like a paper and a pen and stuff. But like I really need to create data and then like look at the data. And I'm not saying that I had a spreadsheet or anything, but it was really writing and journaling that did it. But like I need to get it out on the page so that I can like go back a week ago and be like, oh, that's what all my thoughts were a week ago when I was freaking out. Um, so yeah, so now, like I think that when I first left the trans community, I still was maybe mourning the loss of like understanding that fantasy dude I wanted to be was like never never in the picture, never was going to be in the picture. And so I think for a while I was still mourning that, but
Hmm.
I'm pretty over it now. It's fine
Hmm.
that's not going to be me, you know?
It's
But it
it's like
was a mourning thing. It was
the
sad.
death of a lover, in a way.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes. He was with me for a long time.
One of the things that you mentioned in your talk in Urbane was, I don't know how to say this right. You said it just perfectly, and it's something that I thought about. But like mourning the loss of time, that detransitioners will undergo. One theme is that they spend a lot of time in this community and then this thought process, and they invest a lot of energy and money and resources into this thing, and then they have to like, it's kind of like the sunk cost fallacy coming back to bite
Yes.
you, in a way.
Yeah. That was big for me because um, I just like transitioned at a really bad,
Hmm.
like developmentally, I transitioned at the same time that my friends were getting married and having their first kids.
Huh.
Yeah. And so that was like, that kind of sucked to come out of those years and be like, shoot, I was really broke. So I like, when I detransitioned, I was like the brokest I'd ever been, like embarrassingly broke. Like
Hmm.
my friends now like owned houses and were married, and I like was just,
Hmm.
it was just a bad time to be like, shoot, I got to start over, you know?
Hmm.
And, it was
Could
definitely a sunk cost. Oh, go on. Say.
Would you would you mind just kind of dating this, in like how old you were, or about?
Yeah, I transitioned at 30, which is like a lot older than a lot of the
Yeah. Okay.
detransitioners out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was trans-identified for a little bit before then, but like I took testosterone at 30. So I took testosterone at 30 and then literally attended 4 weddings. And, um,
Huh.
yeah. And
Huh.
so when yeah, it was really interesting. Um, so yeah, it was like humble, and I took 2 years off of grad school to like, because like I was like, oh, my grad school is homophobic and transphobic, I can't be here.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like I was going to transfer to another program, and then was like, and then kind of was like, wait, this was super unrealistic of me to think that you can transfer grad school credits. And
Oh, yeah.
so, sorry, that's not interesting. Like,
Well, no,
edit that
no,
out.
it is
Yeah.
insofar as the way that you were thinking was blocking you off from opportunity. It was really limiting your world.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Thank you for noticing that. Yes. Because I do feel like that's one of my big regrets from that time in my life, is that like my world just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Like
Yeah.
the kinds of workplaces that I could be comfortable in, and the kinds of social relationships that I could be comfortable in, it just like it just turned into this little dot of like, okay, I can be comfortable in like this
Huh.
1.5 block radius and with these 3 people.
Yeah.
And you know, I think when I was deep in it, I was like, this really isn't who I am, because I'm the kind of person who like knocks on doors during get out the vote drives and stuff. Like
Okay.
I my real self is that I can like go and talk to strangers and make friends with them.
Huh.
So to have a time in my life where I was like constantly uncomfortable, constantly scared, was very
Yeah.
notable and
Yeah.
strange.
That's one theme that I see, with a lot of the. It's a misnomer, but progressivism rhetoric, which is actually regressive, and what used to be called liberals are very illiberal now. And I don't want to
Yeah,
enter
go
into
for
that.
it. I
I
love
have
it.
a problem with that, but one theme that I see over and over again, that it it just, there's a flag that goes off, and it's that when you start to call out homophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, not that those things don't exist, but once you start making it the central part of your mission to call out, what you do is you start seeing it everywhere, and then you start feeling more and more on edge and less comfortable and less able to actually reach out and actually resolve that problem or the bigotry in other people, because now you're hardening like to go back to the root of the word cancer, like you're making a shell and something hard, something very immutable and unchangeable out of everything. And then what you end up doing is really limiting yourself.
I love it. Yes, I totally agree. Because how people are educated, that always happens because of a meaningful relationship. Like people learn through first we bond to someone, then we learn from them. And so if you're first if the first thing you do when you meet someone is you're like, wait, are you homophobic? Are you transphobic? Are you racist? Are you sexist? If you're looking for all the ways that people are problematic, first of all, everyone is. So you are going to find the ways that they're problematic, but you also just created big obstacles to a relationship.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want to hear anything you have to say. I certainly never want to hear anything anyone has to say to me after they say that I'm one of those words, you know, like,
yeah.
I don't want to hear what you have to say about anything after that. And like, politics is about talking to people. So if no one wants to hear what you have to say, you're really bad at politics.
That's so funny. We're so fucked up because our politics are all about shutting everybody else down.
Yeah. Our politics are fucked up on a whole new level these days, really. I just don't think that you should get to have opinions about politics if you haven't like actually gone to talk to a stranger about politics at any point, like in real life. You should have to have that experience before you get to like write essays on the internet about.
It's interesting. That's a wonderful form of gatekeeping. You have to know how to be friendly.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That actually is really what I believe. I really don't think that you should have opinions about politics until you at least know how to be friendly. You don't have to be friendly all the time, but you have to have the skill set. That is what I think. Thank you for articulating that.
What were you in grad school with before you tried to transfer? What were you going for?
Oh, it was the same thing. It was family therapy. But when I first went, I wanted to be a sex therapist, which like I didn't really understand what sex therapists do. I would never want to be a sex therapist these days.
What is a sex therapist? Is that somebody who introduces candles to the bedroom or or the pouring of candles on each other into the bedroom?
My vision of sex therapy was that I was going to help like married women have orgasms with their husbands. That's not what a real sex therapist would do. I think a sex therapist it's like people with bigger problems than that. But so I went to a family therapy program, and then actually like in family therapy, it can be a little bit of a conservative, like in terms of the education you get in a family therapy program, it's very focused on child raising and like what kind of parenting produces healthy kids. So that was not what I was expecting to learn and at all. I was all about like sex back then. So
was that probably.
Yeah, I will say that like I feel like in terms of child rearing and stuff, I got much more conservative, partly because of my education, and then like now the work, I'm pretty like I'm pretty conservative in terms of like how parenting should be done and the kinds of homes that kids should have.
Well, that's the thing about libertinism, or like, you know, I guess hedonism and stuff. It's all great until like you're exposing a child to that. Then it totally wrecks an entire life. Yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think like kids' childhoods are so short these days. Kids don't hardly get any time on this planet before, like, you know, they hear about what's happening on like Law and Order SVU and stuff. Like kids know what a sex crime is, like really young these days.
Yeah.
And I do wish that like kids got a lot more years on this planet of like not having to worry about stuff like that. And certainly not having to worry about whether they are going to give up their fertility and orgasms forever. But,
yes. Fertility, orgasms, and less death on TV. This is the Carey Callahan platform for 2020.
Ooh, I love it. Fertility, orgasms, less death on TV. I could win, right?
No. Well, maybe. I don't know.
No, I couldn't.
It says nothing
No.
about healthcare. I guess fertility is probably tied to healthcare. So
I just reshift all the issues. We're not going to talk about we're not going to talk about the wall. We're not going to talk about healthcare. No, like we're just going to talk about fertility, guys. Like,
do you do that? I really appreciate what you were saying about like becoming conservative, and like there's that old trope about, you know, like people like just growing more conservative as they age. And I wonder if there's not like some sort of like nuanced discussion about like keeping certain libertarian optimistic values as you do become saddled and straddled with the responsibility for a young life and then for a bunch of wealth that you're just accumulating, and then you just kind of have to take care of that stuff. It seems like the only people who can afford to be hyper progressive are people who are already well off, or the young. That just, and I'm totally doing stereotypes and stuff, but like there's that middle class. It's like you can only afford to be so progressive.
yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because I was talking to my dad about this, and like definitely like through detransition and also just like becoming, you know, like being serious about my career and just like growing older. Like my values have gotten much more middle class. Like I'm much more like, you know, people should really try and work it out before they get divorced. You know, like kids shouldn't watch TV after 8 o'clock. Kids should have a bedtime every night, you know, and like, but it does have a lot to do with economics and like, if like, especially like if you're trying to go from like lower middle class to truly middle class, like, you have to live a kind of careful life. And I think those values or that kind of lifestyle kind of has to do with living a careful life.
Yeah. It seemed to go back to that Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind. I don't know if you've read it, but
I didn't.
do you know who Jonathan Haidt is? He's a
Yeah, but tell me about the book though, because I definitely don't know what's in that book.
well, he just talks about moral foundations theory, and he talks about how he was a liberal and he could never understand conservatives, but then he started researching like what's actually informing the conservative mindset, and how there's a broad set of values that people have. Like there's like a disgust kind of value, and then a loyalty value, and then like there's this thing called the care harm foundation, and a lot of progressive moralizing is built on like caring for the other person and like avoiding harm. So you have a lot of stuff about like protecting immigrants, protecting all these protected classes, and avoiding harm. Like so, like this care harm foundation, and it just seems. It just seems very odd that when you're entrusted with a single individual, let's just say, for example, a child, which is just the standard thing that you're all of a sudden entrusted with, that you do have this care harm, like you want to protect them from harm and you want to care for them, but because you are so rooted in that material reality with that child, that economic reality of the child, that you have to make a bunch of other evaluations of how you interact with society at large, like who you're loyal to. I'm going to be loyal to people who are going to protect me. I'm going to have a very strong disgust foundation because there's certain behaviors that are going to corrupt the child in the way of like physically corrupt them, or like lead them down certain sorts of behaviors that will end up getting them stuck in a very short feedback loop of running after pleasure. Right. So you just start getting revolted from, you find pornography revolting because you see how that will shape your child's mind. Let's just say that. So it seems like progressivism as an ideology, if it's not rooted in that very conservative basis of like, yeah, we do need to take care of as many people as possible, but like, how do you do that realistically? How do you really do that realistically is the bigger question. Like with, AOC's. I can never pronounce her name, so I apologize for that. But Alexandria Cortez, Octavia Cortez, like with the Green New Deal, how like they're going to outlaw SUVs and like change the whole world. This great big dream. But like if you actually look at like how much that'll cost, it's like there's no way that we can get that. Right?
Yeah. Keep going. I feel like I feel like you're one sentence away from what I should respond to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there was one more thought. Thank you for letting me ramble. Thanks for letting me have a discussion. It seems like when we go out into the world, insofar as Twitter is the world, insofar as political discourse is something that we do have discourse with, and start to build bridges with people who are really concerned with the rights of other people, the rights of trans people, the rights of gay people, but like that doesn't seem like to be a hot button issue, but the rights of all these people, and they're very inflamed about changing the world right now. And they see anybody who questions them as not just a block to progress, but somebody who's actually defeating progress, like as they speak. Like, have you developed tools or attitudes in dealing with those people?
Oh, no, I've gotten way worse at dealing with those people.
Oh, really? Certain. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, I can't deal with those people at all. I mean, just to say in my real life, I hardly come across those people anymore.
Yeah.
Which I used to live only among those people.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, I think, gosh, what do I want to say about this? There's so much to say. You know, it's so much harder coming up with realistic plans. Like actually coming up with a plan that you can fulfill is incredibly hard. And you kind of like have to plan on failing again and again and again, right? So especially in the political arena, to actually come up with a workable system, like you're going to fail and get humiliated again and again and again. And what I see, especially from the Democrats, and I am still a Democrat despite this, is that I don't think that we show enough respect to people who have a real track record of like actually passing lots and lots of legislation. I think that we get way more enamored with like people who actually don't have a legislative track record, but are kind of like saying, you know, they have an exciting image like AOC, or they're saying like, you know, they're very good at speaking or something like that. And you know, I really would like to continue to vote Democrat for my lifetime. I really would like to, but we need to start prioritizing like people who have proven that they can actually pass legislation, and that always means getting some Republicans to vote with you. Like it just always means that. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely, there's not enough people don't actually respect practicality enough. They don't in general. Yeah, I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah, you're really showing your codgerliness with that.
No, it's true. Okay, I want to just keep going and get angry. Okay, can I rant about something real quick?
Please, bring me.
Yeah, okay. So as part of my work, I got to assess for suicide risk a lot. Okay, like that's just part of the job. And there are three main protective factors when you're assessing for suicide risk. If someone has a strong religious belief that suicide is a sin, that's a great protective factor. Like someone who believes that is way less likely to commit suicide. The other two things are having a pet or having a kid. So if you want to make sure that you don't kill yourself, like probably get a pet, probably have a kid, okay? And probably join a church. Yeah. So I saw like on Facebook, one of my like counselors I went to school with posted this thing about shaming people for suicidal ideation, and how like calling suicide a sin was shaming people, right? So I am someone who actually like, I did spend like 6 months of my life like deeply suicidal at some point, like when I was trans. And And so I feel really, really strongly about people not killing themselves. I honestly think that all this detransition stuff, the moral upside of it is that if you reach a point where you're either where you think you might kill yourself, and then you think, or maybe I'll detransition, like detransition instead. Don't kill yourself. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
just keep going. But it just kind of like shook me to see her talking about how what I think of as this great protective factor, this religious belief that it's wrong to kill yourself, is shaming people. Because like that belief that it might be deeply wrong to kill yourself will keep some people from killing themselves. And I'm not sold that, like, go on, you're having a lot of trouble with this.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, okay, I kind of understand body shaming, but disembody shaming is like a whole new level of weird.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the thing is you don't want to shame someone for having the idea that they might want to kill themselves because, like, well, first of all, like, lots and lots of people have that idea, right? I've had that idea. Like, lots and lots of people have that idea. It's more a sign of how sad you are than anything else, you know? So, but is it wrong to be like, but that action is unequivocally wrong? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that it's psychologically harmful to people to like be like, no, but it's wrong to do that.
Well, it's displacing the problem, or this finding the solution off of this one thing. It's like, okay, that might end the problem, but that's not a solution. And
Right.
saying that very strongly, I think if the person can't hear that phrasing, but just say it's a sin because they're at that level of narrative, then it still has the same outcome, that they have to find another way to deal with the problem, other than
Yeah,
just
it's true.
ceasing to exist, which doesn't solve the
Yeah.
problem. It doesn't solve the problem.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't. You aren't going to be less sad when you're dead. That's not how sadness works.
Or death. But we don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But to tie it back into the like making plans thing, it was like, so wait, if we take away this protective factor, if we're going to try and argue people out of this protective factor, like, what's your plan for what replaces this protective factor? You know? I've gone off the rails, but
No. It made me think
really strongly about it.
The shame is uncomfortable, but it's a very strong directive force in our life that, if handled correctly on a societal level, can actually shape society and help the individual get to a better place. And that brings me back to what you were saying about the Democrats, and not only have the Democrats, and I will be voting Democrat at least in the primary, which has already started, for God fucking sakes.
The torture just continues. We never get a break.
But not only have the Democrats not backed up people who can succeed, but they haven't learned how to fail. And a lot of the blowback from that we're experiencing right now is because the Democrats haven't been able to lose gracefully. And instead they're just trying to flip the chessboard, right? They're trying to flip the Magic the Gathering card table, right?
Yes.
And it just makes me think about the same thing with shame. It's like, instead of understanding how shame operates and learning from shame, there's like no shaming. And then they go around and shaming all the people who are using shame. But the same thing with failure. It's like, it sucks to fail, but you have to learn from the failure, and that's the prompt. Like, the failure, or and it goes back to like what you were saying about like having this condition, or like this feeling of hatred of your body coming up over and over and over again. It's like, it reminds me of this story I heard when I was a kid about the blind deaf girl, mute, Helen Keller.
Cool. I love this.
Okay.
It's like Helen Keller.
It's just like Helen Keller. There's this story in her autobiography of like her first teacher that started to try to really teach her. Every day they'd go down to a water fountain, and the teacher stuck her hand under the water fountain and then poured the water onto her hand and then tapped her hand over and over and over again, like communicating that this is water over and over and over again. And like just the story like was so beautiful because it's like that, because she's describing that moment of realization of tying these two stimuli together. And then you can start to succeed, like, because failure is not like, it's a prompt or a psychological condition like disgust or depression. It's telling you something. Yourself is in communication with you. And psychology is the tools of learning how to read what life is presenting you or what you're presenting yourself.
I'm totally into this because I do think, there was definitely a point, especially when I was very, very miserable and trans-identified, where I was like, why on earth would I be given this really intense experience, this like gender dysphoric experience? Like why, like it felt like, okay, so I got handed this misery, but like there's no solution to it. And like, why did I get handed it? Like, why, but like, you're handed the experiences you're supposed to process. Like just what you said about digestion, you're handed what you're supposed to process,
Mm-hmm.
and like, it was because I couldn't see the end of the road yet. I couldn't see like 6 years out that there was going to be a point in my life where I had journaled it out. I couldn't see that there would be a point in my life where like, there would be a point in my life where I felt like, oh no, this actually is like one of the gifts in my life that I got given this experience to have again and again and again and to think about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when you're in it, you can't see 6 years out. And certainly I would say that like there's literally no way I could have imagined that 6 years out, the context would have shifted so much and my life would have shifted so much and everything. So, I think the thing is like, but that's what, just to bring it back, like, well, that's why suicide is so wrong, because you can't see 6 years out and, you're going to cut yourself off from like a much more surreal set of blessings than you understand.
It seems like it's a lack of faith, and I've had pretty strong suicidal moments, but it's a lack of faith, but it's also a lack of love, or the ability to love yourself.
Yeah.
And more than just as you are right now, like really understanding and that might be impossible for some of us to experience when we're stuck in that, not being able to see time, not really being able to trust the future self.
Yeah. And I think a lot, I read some quote that helped me a lot about self-love, which is like, love is an action, not a feeling, right? And when I was, sometimes I feel pretty bad about like my body and stuff, right? But like love is an action. Love isn't the feeling. The feeling that's a separate thing, right? So like, I think the challenge is on days when you have really bad feelings about yourself, right? Or your body or your skills or, your failures or your successes or whatever, like you have to keep doing loving action, because that actually is self-love. So what's loving action for yourself today? And that helped me a lot, especially when I really got serious about tracking my gender dysphoria. Would be like, okay, so like what's loving action, just whatever my feeling landscape is this day, what's loving action for me?
That idea, that concept, in the light of what's being peddled now as affirmation, which is based on a subjective feeling, that we're going to change you because of a feeling you have right now. We're going to take this action based on this feeling. I don't know. Like, it's so complex. I mean, and there's no one size fits all solution to certain feelings.
I have a rant about this, actually.
Okay.
This specific thing. So
you're very lovely when you rant. So.
Oh, thanks. Great. You're so patient. I love it. So like a lot of my work is helping people separate like the desires that you get from feelings, because every feeling sends us a strong message about an action that we should take, from the actions that will create the scenario they want to live out, right? So like, what is the correct action for you? The correct action will create the situation you want. So in a very real way, like actions are justified by the situations they create.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times when we talk about strong feelings, we act as if actions are justified by the feeling we had, right?
Yeah.
So when someone like punches their husband or whatever, they'll be like, I was so mad at him. And you got to be like, well, that's great you were so mad at him. And yet that feeling doesn't justify the action, right?
Yeah.
The action is justified by what it created, and it created like an assault charge or whatever.
Yeah.
And that for me, when I was like trans identified, I was very much taking actions as if the actions were justified by feelings, right? So I feel miserable, I feel dysphoric, thus I should take testosterone, right? And that's not the way to plan out an action. You should take testosterone if the testosterone, once you think about it very, very logically, will create the situation you want, right? It shouldn't be like, I'm miserable, so I need testosterone. It should be like, in 2 years, I would like my body to look like this, my face to look like this, and testosterone actually will get me there. And that's not what I did. And if my main critique for the therapist that I had back then is that she didn't in any way help me separate the feelings from the plan. And I do think that transition is a really tricky thing to actually do successfully. So you do actually need a therapist who will challenge your plans. Like, wait, with your body, will testosterone actually help you pass? And that's not in any way what my therapist said to me. My therapist was like, take testosterone, and if it feels good, then you'll know that it's right. And like, that's horrible advice. Testosterone feels good to lots of people. But more than that, if you want to create a certain situation, you want to make sure that taking the testosterone gets you to that certain situation. So I think that that's a big missing thing in a lot of therapeutic response to gender dysphoria, is this separating out the emotional experience from the actual planning. Yeah,
from the outcome.
Right. Like, you should only do the actions that create the outcome you want.
Is there not
if you keep running into outcomes that you don't want, then like, very obviously something's wrong with your actions.
Yeah. Is there not a selection pressure for therapists to be affirmative by the community that they're serving? And won't the person who is acting out of the feeling just find a therapist that will cater to that way of thinking? I mean, beyond the affirmative model being pushed on the level of psychology and the medical profession, but isn't there like a capitalistic pressure that's being exerted by people getting business from the people who are going to affirm and push them forward?
Yeah, I think there's both a capitalistic pressure, and then there's like sort of a coercion happening too, where it's like you certainly do not want like someone getting in a trans like Facebook group and saying that like you weren't sufficiently affirmative or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I do think that there is a way to affirm the identity and challenge shitty plans, though. Like I think my therapist could have been like, yeah, you're non-binary, your best life is as looking like a dude. However, from the plan you're telling me, I'm not sure how you're going to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's very different than challenging the identity.
Yeah.
So, she maybe could have gotten away with that.
Do you challenge your identity?
My identity?
Yeah.
Oh.
Who is Carey Callahan? That's a reference to the Mad Men season 4 opening.
Wait, what? Which Mad Men episode? Which Mad Men episode is this?
The first episode of season 4. When the reporter asks Don Draper, so who's Don Draper? Do you,
I love that.
do you know Mad Men?
Yeah, I
Okay.
love Mad Men.
Okay.
Love Mad
All right.
Men.
Because the reporter only
Yeah.
has one leg, and Robert has to make a quip about that, or a witty quip, quitty whip.
A whippy quit. Um,
But my
um,
question on like to be more like manageable, the question is, and this is I guess this is a question that I've confronted too in my life. No, I have. When I was obsessed with an identity, I was obsessed with the identity of myself as something, not as and by something it's like I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be a famous writer and like obsessed about that and I wasn't that, so I spent every day in a cafe. Like I got to be this identity. I want to manifest this destiny, right? And that was a
yeah.
big part of my identity, which it's a little bit different than the identity that I see being manifested or being promulgated by young people right now, and probably forever. Like I'm emo this, or I'm trans identified. I'm in this political spectrum or that political spectrum. Like there's always that specter of identity, which I think
Mm.
probably my Christian upbringing and then my parents being involved in a Christian sect gone awry, that I was always kind of
Ooh, I want to know more about that.
yeah, I we could talk about that some other time, but
Yeah.
I was always put off by the idea that a group identity or being seen as something was sufficient. I had to have product. Like my identity was tied into producing something, right? So that was I think that was the best way to channel like that the young person's obsession with identity into a production. It's like, because I have to, in order to be this thing, I have to produce this thing, right? In order to be a great writer, I have to come up with great writing. So how the fuck do I do that, right?
Yeah.
And so, but as I matured and I stopped like obsessing or fantasizing that a reporter was talking to me about how awesome of a writer I was, like, all those fantasies melted away. And I just realized that like, that's not my path, or like my writing is for people after I'm dead or whatever. I started, and as I was broken down by life and went through a lot of different crises, that like I lost my identity, like in relationships. Like I had a relationship, the relationship fizzled. I'm no one now. I'm nothing. I'm literally I'm a snail without a shell now, right? I'm just this blob on
Man,
the
that's
floor.
how I am with breakups. Yes. Okay, go on. I am the worst breaker upper ever. Go on.
Really? Some people are so
Yes.
good at it. I'm so bad at it.
I'm the messiest asshole. I'm the mess. Go on. It takes years of my life have gone to dumb
Yeah.
breakups. But go on. I want to hear more.
Well, I hope you don't break up too many times more in your
Okay,
life.
thanks.
Okay. But now in my early 40s and looking at identity and kind of seeing it as idolatry in a way, like, and
Mm.
it's important to have an idol insofar as that idol gets you to that next stage of your life where you have some sort of capital, you have some sort of skills at the end of this. And to avoid the question of like, well, how much did you lose by going down the path of chasing an identity? Like, what did you really gain from that? And like, who is Carey Callahan
Mm.
now? And like, how do you relate to her? And like, how do you understand her? I mean, and that if you would ask that question of me, who's Benjamin Boyce, I would totally have like identity dysmorphia because I don't even like my
Yeah.
name. I don't like being a person,
Yeah.
But like, how do
You
you
said I don't
manage
like
that?
being a person. Is that what you just said?
It freaks me out, like having a person being a
Being a
person.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the truest shit. You're right though. It's freaky. It's freaky being a person. Um, you know, I don't know. Like I've been real stupid like a lot of my life and like
You're not
um
alone, okay? You're just rare in that you can see it.
so like, you know, I had like a long like almost like 8 years of my life where I was like I'm a stand-up comic,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like I was so invested in that identity that I wasn't picking up on the fact that I was really miserable doing stand-up comedy.
Hmm.
Do you know what? Like I missed all the process. I missed all the ways that didn't fit me because I wanted so badly for that. I needed that identity. so badly.
Yeah.
And then I frankly think that working through that with stand up kind of like helped me with transition and detransition, because I sort of was like, I had already gone through like oh wait, I'm invested in this identity that's making me miserable. And then when transition made me miserable, I was like, oh shit, I'm back here. I'm back invested in an identity that's like day in and day out bringing me down and bumming me out and stuff. So like I think I'm like really trying to be a lot more flexible these days. And like, especially with detransition, I feel like I've kind of had to pivot a lot. Like, you know, for a while I was like writing like a blog under like a pseudonym.
Yeah.
And then I was making YouTube videos. And now, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm tweeting, and like every 2 months I write an essay, you know? And like, so like, I kind of am just like trying to keep actually being flexible. Like I certainly am invested in being a family therapist. Like I like it. It makes me happy. It makes me feel like powerful, and I enjoy, you know, it's good for my spirit. It's good for my spirit. It's good for my like conception of human beings and how good we are.
Yeah.
I definitely have a higher opinion of humans because of getting to do this work.
Yeah.
So since that's good for me, I'm just going to keep doing that for as long as I can do it, you know?
Yeah.
And beyond that, I don't know.
I think part of middle age is becoming kind of middle class, and what middle class means to me is that you're kind of more your job than anything else. And then you get to wake up when you retire and like just be a person again. But like in that prime, that long afternoon of life, it seems like you're I have this story about like this town where there's only one person in the town, but there's 40 of him, and like one is the poet, and one is the sculptor, and one is the alchemist, and one is the, you know, the lamplighter, and the construction worker, and the composer. And basically it's this town, it's set in the Middle Age, and they're all in their middle age, right? And there's only one other person, and it's this single female entity that kind of goes around and wakes these men up to being real. Like once a day, each man gets like 2 minutes with her, and they like, and she shows them who they are beyond just their constant activity. But like, it just seems like middle age is just coming to grips with that constant day in, day out cycle that is so terribly boring in the mind of a 20-year-old, you know, just like, I'm just this one thing over and over again. But like finding that work where you don't feel that strain, it's a gift and a struggle.
Yes, totally. It is a gift, actually. I feel like part of the reason I don't want to get too big into like kind of some kind of identity thing anymore is because I do have to like wake up day in and day out and figure out how to like be happy, and you know, how to be moral and ethical and happy, and so that for me is about like not getting too defined, and to like, I want to be growing, I want to be changing, I want to be like greeting each new day.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking real cheesy right now.
No, I think I'm going to follow you in the cheesy line. It's like, I don't have a problem being Benjamin, just so far as everybody understands that you're only ever interacting with the Benjamin who was, like, not the Benjamin who will be, you know? Like, I just don't want to be stuck. I don't want to be like that thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I reserve the right to keep growing up and like keep... Next year, I should think about some things differently and be better at some stuff.
Yeah.
As long as I don't like pick up an addiction or something, you know.
Well, I don't know. There's like you have your mocktail. That might be a cozy addiction for you. Is it ginseng? What's the composition?
There is ginseng in this. There's like kava. Is that a thing? Kava.
Sure.
This was expensive. This was.
I bet it smells horrible. It's so good for you.
It's supposedly so good for you. And a bottle, which was 12 servings, was $47.
Wow, you are so bougie.
I know, and I'm way too poor to be this bougie. It makes no sense for me to have bought this thing, but I can't like drink, and I like so it's like, yeah.
What was the funny word that you called it in our chat before we started ringing? Like there's a cool word.
Adaptogen.
Adaptogen.
An adaptogen is an herbal thing that helps you respond to stress better.
Okay.
So my mocktail is full of things that help me respond to stress better.
Well, I hope I'm not a stressor in your day.
No, this was lovely. This was like a bath. It was lovely.
Oh, a sitz bath. There we go. That's the
like
best thing.
Epsom salt.
I mean, that's what I'm going to call my podcast, Bathing with Benjamin. Bask in my verbal sudsiness.
Like, you need a video series where you're in a hot tub with people, right?
Oh.
With Ray Blanchard, you and Dr. Blanchard in a hot tub, talking about how to get a feeling. Do it. Oh my God, do it.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So into it.
That'd be cool. No, and if I can get funding, it'll be at like a hot tub in the back of like some big monster truck, and we can just drive through Arizona and like eat barbecue and talk about the issues of the day.
Oh, that would be so rad. There's got to be some jokey thing, like because it's I mean, you're doing this gender stuff, but it's more than that, right? Yeah, but I do feel like the back of a pickup truck hot tub is the right setting to be having these conversations, right?
Yeah, either that or like a sandbox, and we can be raking the sand and rearranging rocks and talking about deep psychological issues. You know, like switch it up. You know, every season we have a different like medium in the back of the pickup truck.
Yeah, reserve your right to change. I love it.
Yeah, no, adapt.
Going.
Everything. I have a bunch of hats, but I don't get to wear them because I do all these interviews, and I think it's disrespectful to show up with a pirate hat. But you know.
Yeah. We talked about a lot.
We talked about a lot for a lot, and this is a wonderful conversation. It was like we were on the radio. It's like you could be, I don't know, you're the Howard Stern, and I'm Adam Carolla. I don't know who you would be on the radio. Do you have like a radio person that you want to be? Terry Gross?
Alex Jones.
Alex
Is he
Jones,
on the radio
really?
Still?
No, I can't do his voice.
He was never on the radio, right?
I don't know, maybe.
No, way back when I was crazy and trans, I had a sex podcast. I had sex.
Is that still around?
No, you can't find any copies of it.
Weird.
Thank our Lord that you can't find any copies of my sex podcast because it was the most embarrassing shit you can ever find.
Wait, it was like a call-in show or?
No, it was live. It was people would just come. We would just tape it live, but it was awkward sex stories.
Oh.
But like in front of an audience and like.
Ooh.
Actually, people should not actually tell their awkward sex stories in front of an audience because that stuff can get like really deep and like. Yeah. Don't do deep stuff in front of an audience. Actually,
well,
it's not.
Yeah.
safe.
Maybe. I was gonna do a live stream episode on my bottom surgery, but. I got 5 minutes in, and then I realized I was on a bunch of OxyContin, and that this is a horrible idea. And by bottom surgery, I mean literal bottom surgery, nothing fancy. Like,
what? What? Oh my God. Well, we've all been on Oxy with bad ideas. No, I'm joking, but.
Well, I've had some good ideas on Oxy too, actually. I have some amazing. Some of my best literature was made with the aid of Percocet. I think it was like this beautiful passage. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. Don't try this at home, kids. Opiates are none of your business. Stay out of them.
None of your business. Yeah. Let's protect the kids. Kids need a longer childhood. So let's.
Yeah, I don't think kids are watching my show. That's why I make these really long videos. They don't have the stomach for it. you know?
That is the truth. They don't have the attention span.
Nope.
They really don't.
We adult them right out of this conversation. What you say, their dopamine?
Their dopamine's all fucked up. Kids' dopamines are totally, like, because they've been hacked from, like, they've been watching, like, phones from, like, 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I barely have an attention span, but, like, kids these days really don't have an attention span.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I have an intention span.
That sounds like the hippiest. Tell me what an intention span is.
I don't know.
What is this hippie cult thing that you have?
I don't know. I was trying to be. Yeah, I know. That's the problem with being a punster. All of a sudden, you're a guru. You turn the corner and like, oh shit, I created a religion. I was just trying to make something funny.
Do it. Intention span. Like, let's work on that, because that's we can make money off of that.
No, there's money to be made. Actually, and in a slightly more serious, but not that much more serious note, I wrote the science fiction book, and it talks about like this brave new world where everybody's plugged into like this internet ethereal reality. But I go in this huge, like weird David Foster Wallace passage. It's all this footnote about like the properties of human consciousness, which is it's all reduced into attention. And like we have these two, like this X and Y axis of attention span, which is like how long you can pay attention to thing. And then attention pan, which is how much you can pay attention to at the same time.
Oh.
And like people like focus on the attention span, like, you know, for like a kid can only be attention to the one thing. It's like, no, they just have a broader attention pan. They need to be paying attention to a lot more, just with shorter amount of attention.
Oh, I love that. I actually really love that. That's cool. Yeah. I'm going to keep thinking about that.
Develop it.
I'm going to develop it because, I love that. It is true. Like, oh, I'm sorry. You just blew my mind. I'm going to keep thinking about that. I think that might be a nice way to like talk to kids about about doing homework and how they can focus on doing homework. Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it up because we're just looking at each other's eyes now.
Okay. Stop. Stop, you flirt. Jeez.
Oh, I keep on.
Gonna die.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I had one more thing to say, but we'll leave it there.